You cannot remember being a baby. Not one moment of it. Not the first time you saw your mother's face. Not learning to walk. Not the day you worked out that the sounds coming out of people's mouths meant something. And that is strange, because you were not asleep for it. You were awake, and you were learning faster than you ever will again. In those first 3 years, you built a working model of gravity, of faces, of cause and effect. You learned that objects continue to exist when nobody is looking at them. You acquired an entire language from scratch, with no dictionary, no grammar lessons, and no instruction. It is the most intense period of learning in a human life, and it happens before you can be taught. And you kept none of it. Ask most adults for their earliest memory, and you get something around 3.5 years old. A room, a staircase, a dog, usually one fragment, with no before and no after. Some people report memories from earlier. Most of those are wrong, and we will come back to why. But below roughly 2 years old, there is almost nothing. Not a blur, not a fog, an absence. This has a name: childhood amnesia. And the reason for it is far stranger than simply forgetting. Start with the obvious assumption that nothing was recorded, that babies do not form memories at all. That assumption is wrong, and we can prove it. Show a 6-month-old a specific sequence of actions with an unfamiliar toy. Come back weeks later. They will reproduce the sequence. This is called deferred imitation, and it cannot work unless something was stored and then retrieved. Infants recognize faces they have seen once. They remember the order of events in a routine. They anticipate the next note in a song they have heard before. Change something in a familiar room, and they will look at the thing that changed, which means they were holding a model of how it used to be. By 9 months, an infant can hold on to a learned action for over a month. By 2 years, for a year or more. So the recording works. Memories are being made constantly, at a rate that would exhaust an adult. Which means childhood amnesia is not a failure to write. It is a failure to keep. And that changes the question completely. These memories are not missing. Something takes them. The first thing taking them is construction work. Episodic memory, the kind that stores actual events with a time and a place and a version of you inside them, depends on a structure called the hippocampus. Its job is binding. An experience arrives in pieces, scattered across the brain. Color in one place, sound in another, position, smell, emotion, all somewhere else. The hippocampus ties those fragments into one object that can be pulled back later as a single thing. In an infant, the hippocampus is not finished. It is being built while it is being used. And it is doing something at a scale it will never approach again. It is producing new neurons in enormous numbers. Neurogenesis. Those new cells do not politely wait for an empty slot. They wire themselves into circuits that are already running, and in doing so they disturb the patterns held there. A memory is not a file on a disk. It is a pattern of connections. Change the connections, and you change the memory, or you lose it. We have tested this directly in both directions. In mice, artificially raising the rate of neurogenesis in adults causes them to forget things they had previously remembered reliably. And suppressing neurogenesis in infant mice causes them to keep memories they would normally have lost. Turn it up, they forget. Turn it down, they remember. That is what makes it convincing. It is not a correlation. It is a lever. So your earliest memories were not deleted. The filing system was rebuilt around them while they were still inside it. But construction is only half the story. The other half is that you had nowhere to put them. An episodic memory is not simply a recording of an event. It is a recording of an event happening to someone. It needs a self at the center. Without that, you have information, but you do not have autobiography. You have data without an owner. And that self arrives late, in stages. Somewhere between 18 and 24 months, most toddlers pass the mirror test. Put a small mark on their forehead. Show them a mirror. And instead of reaching for the reflection, they reach for their own head. That is the first hard evidence of a self that can be the subject of a memory rather than just a body moving through a room. Then comes language, and language does something to memory that is very easy to underestimate. It gives you a way to encode an experience as a story, with an order, with a cause, with a narrator. The evidence here is unusually direct. When researchers take people's early memories and compare them against when that person actually had words for the thing that happened, the memories cluster after the vocabulary arrives. Events that occurred before the child had language to describe them tend not to survive. And it shows up across whole cultures. In families where adults do a lot of elaborate reminiscing with small children, asking questions, filling in detail, building the narrative out loud, first memories arrive earlier. Where that kind of talk is less common, they arrive later, sometimes by more than a year. The earliest average first memories recorded anywhere belong to a culture with an unusually strong tradition of narrating family history to children. Memory, it turns out, is not only storage. It is storage plus a story to hang it on. Before you had the story, the events had nothing to attach to, and they slid off. Now the part that surprises people most. You did not lose those memories as a baby. You lost them as a child. Young children can remember their early years. Ask a 5-year-old about something that happened when they were 3, and they can often tell you about it. The memory is there. It is intact. It is reachable. And then it goes. Researchers have followed the same children across years. They record events with them early, then return again and again to test what remains. Between roughly 5 and 7, recall holds up reasonably well. Somewhere after that, it falls away sharply. By 9 or 10, most of what those children could once describe in detail is simply gone. So there was a version of you that remembered being 2 years old. That version of you was about 6. And then those memories were quietly discarded, and nobody noticed, including you. There is one more complication, and it is an uncomfortable one. A significant share of what people confidently report as their earliest memory never happened. Not as a lie, as a reconstruction. You have seen the photograph. You have heard the story told at the dinner table 400 times. And your brain, which is extremely good at assembling coherent scenes out of fragments, builds one, then files it under memory. When researchers examine memories that people date to before the age of 2, a large proportion carry the signatures of reconstruction rather than recall. Impossible viewpoints. Seeing yourself from the outside, from across the room, which is not how experience is ever recorded. Details lifted straight from a family photograph. Lighting that belongs to a camera and not to a room. And from the inside, it feels exactly the same as a real one. There is no tag, no marker, nothing that separates a genuine early memory from a well-constructed one. The confidence you feel is not evidence, which raises a reasonable question. If all of this is so consistent, so predictable, and happens to every human being who has ever lived, is it a failure at all? Probably not. What the first years are for is not recording episodes. It is extracting rules. A baby does not need to remember the individual afternoon it dropped a spoon 11 times. It needs the rule that objects fall. It does not need every conversation. It needs the phonemes, the grammar, the shape of a language. Specifics get discarded. The pattern underneath them is kept. You are not carrying the memories because the memories were the raw material, not the product. So here is where all of this leaves you. The person who learned your first word, who worked out that the face above the cot was reliable, who fell over several thousand times and got back up each time without any evidence it would eventually work. You cannot reach them. That period is closed. It is not a question of trying harder or of the right smell or the right photograph. There is no door, but it is not gone in the way you are imagining. The events were discarded. What they built was kept. Whether you expect the world to be roughly safe. What happens in your body when someone leaves the room? What a raised voice does to you before you have decided anything about it. Your first language, sitting so deep in you that it does not feel learned at all. All of that was laid down in the years you cannot remember, by experiences you will never retrieve, by a person you would not recognize. You do not remember any of it. You are made of it.